A guy is driving when suddenly his car runs out of gas. Just then, a bee buzzes in through the window. "Hey, what's going on?" asks the bee. "Out of gas," the guy replies. The bee says, "Hang tight," and zooms off. A few minutes later, the guy sees a whole swarm of bees fly over and dive right into his gas tank. After a little while, the bees fly away. "Go ahead, give it a try," says the bee. The guy turns the key and the car starts perfectly. "Wow, what did you put in my tank?" he asks. The bee grins and says, "BP." Earl, 75, is an old man with one rule. He controls the TV. Been that way for 50 years. Until last night. Martha, his wife, walks in and says, "I want to watch my show." Earl grunts, "Football's on." Martha smiles, walks over, and pulls out a second remote from her purse. "You mean was on?" He glares. She smiles. He changes the channel back. She pulls out a third remote. He yells, "How many of those do you have?" She sips her tea and says, "Enough to control your TV, your blood pressure, and your afterlife." Ethel and George had been married for 42 years. They don't hold hands. They hold grudges. One night, as they lay in bed, George let out a snore so loud it shook the window blinds. Ethel didn't even flinch. She calmly reached over, grabbed her slipper, and gently placed it over his face. Not to smother him, just to remind him, I could. The snoring stopped for 3 glorious seconds, then came back louder. Ethel sighed, rolled over, and muttered, "If I knew in sickness and in health included this tractor engine every night, I'd have married the milkman." George, without opening his eyes, replied, "The milkman snored too. That's why your sister divorced him." They both lay there in silence, married, grumpy, and somehow perfectly in love. Ma was clanging around in the kitchen when she shouted, "Earl, that outhouse is acting up again. Go fix it." Earl, sitting in his favorite chair, scratching his belly, hollered back, "Ain't nothing wrong with that throne of glory woman." Ma snapped, "There's a weird smell, a funny sound, and something down there growled at me. Now get." So old Earl grabbed his boots, one on the wrong foot, grumbled all the way to the backyard and stood staring at the outhouse like it had insulted his mama. "Looks fine to me," he yelled. Ma poked her head out the window and yelled, "You gotta stick your head in the hole to really see the problem." Earl looked like he just got slapped by a chicken. "You done lost your mind, woman. I ain't poking my head in no poop chute," Ma shouted. "Do it or sleep with the goats tonight." So, with the grace of a confused raccoon, Earl lowered himself and peered into the hole like he was searching for treasure. Suddenly he screamed, Ma, I'm stuck! My beard is caught in the seat!" Ma, not even flinching, calmly shouted, "Hurts, don't it?" Now Earl won't go near that outhouse without a helmet, a flashlight, and a beard net. A wild Karen stormed into the coffee shop, snatched her fancy order, took a sip, and froze like she just discovered betrayal in a cup. "Excuse me," she shouted. "This coffee is stale. I demand a fresh one. Now." The manager, a caffeine warrior on his 8th shift this week, replied, "No problem, ma'am. I'll make it myself." 5 minutes later, he returns with a fresh cup, crafted with love, stress, and mild trauma. Karen sips, instantly spits. "This tastes like dirt!" she screams. Without blinking, the manager smiles and says, "It should. It was ground 5 minutes ago." Even the coffee beans were giggling. 2 elderly women were out driving in a large car. Both could barely see over the dashboard. As they were cruising on along, they came to an intersection. The stoplight was red, but they just went on through. The woman in the passenger seat thought to herself, "I must be losing it. I could have sworn we just went through a red light." After a few more minutes, they came to another intersection and the light was red again and again. They went right though. This time, the woman in the passenger seat was almost sure that the light had been red, but was really concerned that she was losing it. She was getting nervous and decided to pay very close attention to the road and the next intersection to see what was going on. At the next intersection, sure enough, the light was definitely red, and they went right through, and she turned to the other woman and said, "Mildred, did you know we just ran through 3 red lights in a row? You could have killed us." Mildred turned to her and said, "Oh, am I driving?" At the airport security checkpoint, a statistician is pulled aside when agents discover something suspicious in his bag: a bomb. Startled, the officers demand an explanation. The statistician calmly responds, "Look, I've done the math. The odds of a bomb being on a plane are about 1 in 10,000, but the odds of 2 bombs being on the same flight, that's 1 in 100 million, so just trying to be safe." A couple had been happily married for over 60 years. Throughout their long life together, they shared almost everything, except one little secret. The wife kept a small shoebox hidden high on the top shelf of their closet and always warned her husband never to open it or ask about it. Years passed, and one day the wife fell seriously ill. The doctor told them she likely wouldn't recover. As they prepared for the inevitable, the husband carefully took down the mysterious box and brought it to her bedside. With a gentle nod, she gave him permission to finally see what was inside. He opened the box slowly and found 2 delicate crocheted dolls resting on top of a neat stack of cash, totaling $95,000. Perplexed, he looked at her and asked, "What's all this about?" She smiled softly and explained, "When I was about to marry you, my grandmother gave me some advice for a happy marriage. She said if I ever got upset or angry with you, instead of arguing, I should keep quiet and crochet a doll." The husband's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the 2 dolls. Only 2 dolls, after all these years. She nodded. Yes, only twice. He felt a rush of joy and gratitude. Their marriage had truly been filled with love and patience. Then he looked back at the money and asked, "But where did all this money come from?" With a little laugh, she answered, "Oh, that's from selling the dolls." Little Johnny climbed onto Santa's lap and Santa asked, "What would you like for Christmas?" Johnny replied, "A darn swing set in the backyard." Santa blinked. "Excuse me? I said I want a darn swing set in the backyard." Santa frowned. "Johnny, you have to ask nicely if you want Santa to bring you anything. Let's try again. What else would you like?" Johnny thought and said, "A darn sandbox for the side yard." "Johnny," Santa said, "you've got to be polite. Last chance, what else do you want for Christmas?" Johnny paused, then said, "A darn trampoline in the front yard." That was it. Santa gently lifted him off his lap and said, "I'm sorry, Johnny. I can't bring gifts to kids who talk like that." He called over Johnny's parents and explained the situation. They were embarrassed and said, "We've tried everything. We don't know where he picks up that language." Santa nodded. "Here's what to do. Don't get him any of those things. Just put a pile of dog poop in each spot, backyard, side yard, and front yard. That should send a message." The parents agreed. Christmas morning, Johnny runs out back, comes back in, runs out to the side yard, comes back in, then to the front yard, and back inside, frowning. "What's wrong, Johnny?" asked his dad. "What did Santa bring you?" Johnny grumbled. "He brought me a darn dog, but I can't find him anywhere." A Texan goes to Toronto for a vacation. He grabs a cab at the airport and says he's going to the Royal York Hotel. The cabbie heads downtown. On his way, he passes a Queen's Park. "What's that?" says the Texan. "Oh, that's Queen's Park," says the cabbie. "It's our provincial government. It's like your state government. Those buildings are almost 200 years old, and they are quite big." "Oh, we have buildings much older than that, and at least twice as large," says the Texan. They continue along and past First Canadian Place. "Holy cow," says the Texan. "What's that?" "Why, that's First Canadian Place. It is the biggest office complex in the country," says the cabbie. "It took almost 4 years to build." "Really?" says the Texan. "Why, in Houston they have buildings twice that big and built in less than one half the time." They continue on the way, the cabbie a little miffed at the bragging, when they drive past the CN Tower. Now the Texan has his head out the window looking up at the 1850s tower and rotating restaurant at 1300. "Holy crap," says the Texan. "What in God's name is that? How long did it take to build that?" The cabbie nonchalantly glances out the window and says, "Heck if I know. It wasn't there yesterday." 92-year-old's epic response to a teenager's wild hair will leave you in stitches. I stumbled across this story online, and it's too good not to share. Someone took their 92-year-old dad to the mall recently to buy some new shoes, and they decided to grab a bite at the food court. While sitting there, the dad noticed a teenager next to him with both colorful spiked hair. What happened next is guaranteed to make you laugh out loud. Here's how it went down. I'm not sure if this really happened or if it's just a great story, but either way, it's brilliant. I took my dad to the mall the other day to buy some new shoes. He's 92. We decided to grab a bite at the food court. I noticed he was watching a teenager sitting next to him. The teenager had spiked hair in all different colors: green, red, orange, and blue. My dad kept staring at him, and the teenager would catch his gaze every time. When the teenager finally had enough, he sarcastically asked, "What's the matter, old man? Never done anything wild in your life?" Knowing my dad, I quickly swallowed my food to keep from choking on his response, fully expecting a classic comeback. He didn't bat an eye and replied, "Once I danced on a table in a restaurant after a few drinks. I was just wondering if you were my son." Grandma and Grandpa were visiting their kids overnight. One day, Grandpa stumbled upon a bottle of V-pills in his son's medicine cabinet. Curious, he asked if he could try one. His son replied, "I don't think you should, Dad. They're very strong and quite expensive." "How much?" Grandpa inquired. "10 a pill," the son answered. "I don't care," Grandpa said. "I'd still like to try one. Before we leave in the morning, I'll put the money under the pillow." The next morning, the son found $110 under the pillow. He called Grandpa and said, "I told you each pill was $10, not $110. "I know," Grandpa replied with a chuckle. "The 100 is from Grandma." I walked into a doctor's office and the receptionist asked me what was wrong. I replied, "Shingles." She took down my name, address, insurance information, and asked me to have a seat. 15 minutes later, a nurse's aide approached and asked the same question. I said, "Shingles." She recorded my height, weight, and complete medical history before directing me to the examination room. Half an hour later, a nurse entered and inquired again what I had. I responded, "Shingles." She proceeded to give me a blood test, check my blood pressure, perform an electrocardiogram, and then instructed me to remove all my clothes and wait for the doctor. About an hour later, the doctor walked in and found me sitting patiently in the nude. He asked, "So what exactly do you have?" I answered, "Shingles." The doctor then asked, "Where are they located?" I replied with a grin, "Out on the truck. Where do you want me to unload them?" A wife came home early and stumbled upon her husband in their bedroom, tangled up with a stunning young woman. Furious, she yelled, "You disrespectful pig! How dare you do this to me, your faithful wife and the mother of your children? I want a divorce, now!" Her husband, unfazed, replied coolly, "Hold on, love. Let me explain." "Fine, but they'll be the last words you ever say to me," she sobbed. With a dramatic flair, he began, "So, I was getting into my car after work when this damsel in distress flagged me down. She looked lost, helpless, and, dare I say it, like a modern-day Cinderella without the fairy godmother. She was so skinny, it looked like a strong wind could blow her away. She told me she hadn't eaten in 3 days, so naturally, I took pity on her and brought her home. I heated up the pizza I made for you last night. Yeah, the one you left untouched because you were convinced it would magically turn you into a pumpkin. Poor girl devoured it like she hadn't seen food in a decade. She was filthy, so I suggested she take a shower. While she was cleaning up, I took a look at her clothes. Let's just say they looked like they had survived a mud wrestling contest. I tossed them into the trash without a second thought. I offered her those designer jeans you've been avoiding because you say they make your thighs look like tree trunks. I also gave her that set of sexy underwear I got you for our anniversary, which you said didn't match your aesthetic. And then I threw in that blouse my sister gifted you last Christmas, the one you wear as a personal vendetta against her. Oh, and those boots you bought but refused to wear because someone at the office dared to have the same pair. He paused for dramatic effect, then continued. As I walked her to the door, she turned with tears in her eyes and said, "Please, sir, do you have anything else your wife doesn't use? Because I could really use a little more help over here."